The Dallas Cowboys just got hit with a bomb report that has every single fan either panicking or furious right now. And if you care about this team's future, you need to hear what's actually happening with George Pickens, because this could change everything for next season. So smash that subscribe button right now, because we break down every Cowboys move the second it happens, and you do not want to miss what's coming in free agency. Ian Rapoport just dropped a report that the Cowboys are seriously considering a franchise tag and trade scenario for George Pickens. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, this is sending shockwaves through the entire fan base, because we all thought this was a done deal, that Dallas would tag him, negotiate a long-term extension, and lock up one of the best young receivers in football. But now, one of the most plugged-in insiders in the league is saying hold on a tag and trade is absolutely on the table. And the crazy part is Rapoport threw out a trade value estimate that has people losing their minds. He mentioned that Pickens was originally traded to Dallas for a third-round pick. So getting back a second-rounder would be, quote, really good value. And I'm sitting here thinking, are you serious right now? Because let me explain why that logic is completely backwards, and why Cowboys fans should be furious if the front office even entertains this idea. First, let's back up and give you the full timeline, because this all started yesterday when Adam Schefter reported that Dallas would apply the franchise tag to Pickens sometime between February 17th and March 3rd. And Schefter made it sound like this was just a placeholder move to start negotiations and keep Pickens in Dallas long term, which is exactly what most of us expected, because that's how the Cowboys have operated for years with their star players. But then Rapoport comes out today, and his report has a completely different tone. He opens by saying, obviously, the Cowboys are going to franchise tag Pickens like we've known that for a while, and then he immediately pivots to this tag and trade possibility. And honestly, it felt like Rapoport was taking a shot at Schefter for not even mentioning that scenario, because Schefter's report made it sound like the tag was undoubtedly coming just to facilitate keeping Pickens in Dallas. But Rapoport is saying, league insiders believe a trade is legitimately being considered, and that's a massive difference. Now here's what we know for certain versus what's speculation. Because I want to be crystal clear with you guys, the Cowboys have not started contract negotiations with George Pickens yet. That's confirmed, and the expectation around the league is that serious talks will begin at the Combine later this month. So right now we're in this weird limbo period where nothing is official, and all of this is coming from sources around the league, not from the Cowboys or Pickens camp directly, which makes you wonder who's leaking this information and why. Is this coming from the Cowboys trying to set expectations or create leverage? Or is this coming from other teams hoping to pry Pickens away? Or is this just media speculation based on Dallas's recent history of trading stars? And that recent history is exactly what Rapoport pointed to in his report. Because he said, and I quote, the Cowboys have shown a willingness to trade their stars for significant draft pick compensation, and George Pickens' situation will be fascinating to watch as he'll have no shortage of suitors. But here's what nobody is talking about. That willingness to trade stars has happened exactly one time in recent memory, and that was the Micah Parsons trade last year. And yes, both Pickens and Parsons are repped by the same agency, Athletes First. So there's definitely a connection worth discussing, but let me tell you why the Parsons situation was completely different, and why using that as a template for Pickens is insane. The Micah Parsons trade broke every historical trend the Cowboys had followed for decades. Because historically, here's how Dallas operated with their top-tier players. They would drag out contract negotiations for months, getting headlines, getting attention, creating drama, and then at the very last second, they would cave to the agent's demands, give the player exactly what they wanted, and get the deal done. That happened with Dak. That happened with Zach Martin. That happened over and over again, but with Parsons, something shifted. Jerry Jones and the front office got in their feelings during negotiations. Things went sideways, and instead of caving like they always do, they actually pulled the trigger on a trade and shipped Parsons out for a haul of draft picks. And Jerry has since spun that move, as look, we now have the money to pay guys like George Pickens, which is technically true, but let's be real, they would have had the cap space anyway if they managed it correctly. So the question every Cowboys fan is asking right now is, will they do it again? And I'm going to give you my honest take. But first, let me break down why the trade value argument from Rapoport is completely flawed. He said, getting a second-round pick back for Pickens would be really good value since Dallas only gave up a third to acquire him. And on the surface, sure, you're upgrading a full round in draft capital, but that completely ignores what Pickens just gave this team. This past season, the man was putting up all-pro caliber numbers. He was a nightmare for defenses, and he was one of the few bright spots on an offense that desperately needed playmakers. So getting back a second-round pick for a proven elite receiver who's entering his prime is not good value at all. It's actually terrible asset management, and I hate that idea with every fiber of my being. If you're going to trade George Pickens, you better be getting blown away by an offer. I'm talking multiple first-round picks. I'm talking the A.J. Brown package that Philadelphia got, which was a first and a late third. And yeah, you can say, well, the Eagles had to pay Brown too, just like Dallas would have to pay Pickens. But there's a massive difference between getting a first and a third versus getting a single second-round pick and settling for pick 35 from Tennessee or wherever is not moving the needle for this franchise. Now let me tell you what Joe Hoy from the Dallas Morning News said, because he actually covers this team every single day and knows the pulse of the organization. He tweeted that it's still very early in negotiations, and while it won't be easy, he would be surprised if the Cowboys tagged and traded Pickens. And I completely agree with Joe on this one because everything the Cowboys have been saying publicly points to them wanting to keep Pickens long-term. Jerry Jones literally said at NFL Honors, "I'm looking forward to getting things worked out. So George can be a Cowboy a long time now." Granted, Jerry says a lot of things, and sometimes it means everything, and sometimes it means absolutely nothing. But the pattern of behavior from the front office suggests they view Pickens as a cornerstone piece, not a trade chip. The Cowboys have also made it clear that they started early contract talks with guys like Javonte Williams because they need to keep the franchise tag available specifically for George Pickens, which tells you he's the priority. And if they were seriously planning to trade him, why would they be structuring their offseason plans around tagging him? Unless something goes completely sideways in negotiations, I don't see this front office pulling the trigger on a trade just for the sake of getting draft picks. But here's where it gets interesting and why this report from Rapoport matters, even if it's not the Cowboys' preferred plan. What happens if contract talks go belly up, just like they did with Micah Parsons? Because we all thought Parsons was going to get his extension and be a Cowboy for life, and then everything fell apart and the front office decided to move on. So could that happen again with Pickens? And the honest answer is yes, it could. If Pickens and his agent athletes first start making demands that Dallas views as unreasonable, or if there's a personality clash with Jerry, which, let's be honest, is always possible, then maybe this franchise looks at the situation and says, you know what? We can get significant draft capital back. We can save a ton of cap space, and we can pivot to building the defense, which desperately needs help. And that's the real debate here. Do you pay George Pickens $33 million plus per year and keep one of the best receiver duos in football? Or do you trade him for premium picks and use that money to fix a defense that got shredded all season long? Because I've seen teams like the Philadelphia Eagles have massive success paying two elite wide receivers big money. It can work if you draft well on defense and manage your cap correctly, but the Cowboys have not shown they can consistently draft impact defenders in recent years. So maybe the front office is thinking, we need to reset, we need more picks, we need flexibility, and we need to stop throwing massive contracts at offensive weapons when our defense can't stop anybody. Would you do it though, is the question I keep coming back to. Because if I'm being brutally honest with you, I would not trade George Pickens for a second-round pick. I just wouldn't. The value isn't there. And you're tearing apart one of the few things that actually worked last season. This offense was rolling when Pickens was on the field, and now you want to just blow that up for a mid-second round pick and hope you can replace him in the draft? Or find some bargain veteran in free agency that makes no sense to me whatsoever? If someone offers you 2 first-round picks, okay, now we're talking. If a team is desperate and willing to mortgage their future to get George Pickens, then you have to at least consider it, because that's the kind of haul that can reshape your roster and give you the ammunition to trade up for a franchise quarterback or load up on defensive studs in the draft. But anything short of that, and I'm keeping Pickens and figuring out the money, because here's the reality. The salary cap keeps going up every single year, and what feels like an overpay today is going to look like a bargain 3 years from now if Pickens keeps producing at an elite level. I've spent hours on this channel breaking down how the Cowboys can create 60 to 100 million in cap space if they really want to, and all those videos are available if you need the details. But the point is, this franchise has the financial flexibility to pay George Pickens and still go fix the defense through free agency and the draft. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can do both if you're smart about it and if you stop handing out bad contracts to mediocre players. But that requires discipline and a clear vision from the front office, and I'm not always confident they have that. So, what does all this mean for the locker room and for next season? Because that's what really matters. If the Cowboys trade George Pickens after trading Micah Parsons last year, you're sending a message to the rest of the roster that nobody is safe, and that can create a ton of uncertainty and frustration among players who thought they were building something special together. On the flip side, if you keep Pickens and give him a massive extension, you're doubling down on this offensive core and betting that you can win with elite weapons and a defense that hopefully improves through the draft. The coaching staff has to be watching this closely too, because if you're Mike McCarthy or whoever the coordinator is, you're planning your offense around having George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb as your 1-2 punch, and if that gets ripped away at the last second, you're scrambling to adjust your entire scheme and find new targets for your quarterback, and that's not ideal heading into a season where the Cowboys need to prove they can compete for a championship. For the offseason plan, this changes everything, because if Pickens gets traded, Dallas suddenly has a massive hole at wide receiver, and they're going to have to use premium draft capital or big free agent money to fill that spot, which defeats the entire purpose of trading him for cap space and picks in the first place. It's a vicious cycle, and unless you get an absolute haul in return, you're basically spinning your wheels and hoping things work out. Now let's talk about what happens next, because the Combine is coming up later this month, and that's when real contract discussions are expected to begin, and we should get a much clearer picture of whether Dallas and Pickens can find common ground, or if this is headed for a messy breakup like we saw with Parsons. Pay attention to the reports coming out of Indianapolis, because if there's smoke about negotiations stalling or demands being too high, that's your first sign that a trade could actually happen. But if things are progressing smoothly and both sides are optimistic, then all this tag and trade talk was probably just noise from agents or other teams trying to stir the pot. I also want to see how aggressive other teams are in pursuing Pickens, because Rapoport said he'll have no shortage of suitors, and that's absolutely true. Teams like Tennessee with tons of cap space and a young quarterback, or Washington trying to build around their franchise guy, or even a team like the Chargers who need weapons, those franchises would line up to trade for George Pickens, and if the bidding war gets crazy, Dallas might be tempted to cash in. But again, it has to be the right offer. Anything less than elite compensation, and you're better off just paying the man and keeping him in a Cowboys uniform. Here's my final take on this whole situation, and I want to be very clear. The Cowboys should not trade George Pickens unless they get an offer that absolutely blows them away. I'm talking multiple first-round picks or a package that completely resets the roster, because trading him for a second-round pick or even a late first is bad value, and it doesn't actually solve the problems this team has. You still need to fix the defense, and you still need to surround your quarterback with weapons, so all you're doing is creating a new hole while trying to fill old ones, and that's not a recipe for success. The smart move is to tag Pickens. If you have to use that as leverage to get him to the negotiating table, and then hammer out a long-term deal that keeps him in Dallas for the next 5 or 6 years. Yes, it's going to be expensive. Yes, it's going to be $33 million or more per year. But this is the price of doing business in the modern NFL. And if you want to compete for championships, you have to pay elite players, elite money. And George Pickens is absolutely an elite player who just put together an all-pro caliber season. I get the frustration from fans who feel like this team is stuck in mediocrity and maybe trading Pickens for a haul of picks is the reset button that finally gets Dallas over the hump. But I don't buy it. I've seen too many teams trade away their best players thinking they can rebuild through the draft, and then they end up spinning their wheels for years because draft picks are not guaranteed and you're giving up a proven commodity for a bunch of question marks. And that's a gamble I'm not willing to take with a player of Pickens' caliber. So before we wrap this up, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to be all over this story as it develops. And you're going to want every update the second it drops. We're going to cover the combine. We're going to track every report, every rumor, and every contract detail as this plays out. And when a deal finally gets done, or if a trade shocks the world, you'll hear it here first. What do you think Cowboys Nation should Dallas pay George Pickens, whatever it takes, or should they trade him for the right package of picks? Drop your take in the comments right now. I want to hear if you're team pay or team trade, and what you think the minimum return should be if Dallas even considers moving him, because this is the biggest decision the front office is going to make this offseason, and it's going to define the direction of this franchise for years to come. So get in the comments, let's debate this, and let me know if you think Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are actually crazy enough to let another star walk out the door.